Welcome to Trails to Fame. Today's guest is gospel music extraordinaire and Emmy nominee Charlie Sexton.
The parts go every which way, and hopefully if we do it right, they all come in together at the end. And I love that. And, boy, I love those.
Charlie Sexton is from Austell, Georgia. Charlie has spent most of his music career behind the piano playing for some of the world's most famous Southern gospel groups. Charlie has appeared on many television shows and has produced other productions showcasing his talents to gospel music fans around the world. Now, let's sit down and talk with Charlie Sexton. Well, Charlie Sexton, welcome to Trails to Fame.
Thank you,
Glad you're here today. It's an honor to see you in our studio today. Tell me something. What got you into gospel music?
Well, John, I grew up going to a little country church over in the edge of Austell, Georgia, and we had some fairly famous people that went there. I didn't know that they were famous. I just loved them for who they were, but it was Wendell and Geraldine and Janet, but the world knows them as Wendy Bagwell and the Sunlighters, Wendy, Jerry, and Little Jan. So I never remember a time when they weren't in my life, and I just always loved their music. And I tell you the truth, I really wanted to grow up and be their piano player. And of course, they never really hired a piano player until later in their career. And then by the time I got in the business, Wendell had passed away, and that they were no more. So, but that's really where I got my desire to be in the gospel music field. Was I just loved Wendy Bagwell and the Sunlighters, and loved his crazy stories and the way he handled himself on stage, telling the famous rattlesnake story about them singing in the church where they handled rattlesnakes. And boy, that one made them a lot of money, and I just always thought they were just the coolest people in the world. But that's kind of where I got started. Then just as a kid, grew up, started taking piano lessons, and went to the old-fashioned shape note singing schools, learned the do-re-mis and the technical side of music. So when I did start taking piano lessons, I already kind of had a basis for music. Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that most musicians in Southern gospel are self-taught?
To some degree, there are some that definitely are totally self-taught. I had a friend, somebody said, do you play by ear? He said, yeah, that's why they look like they do. But a lot of them are. But then here of late especially, some of these young kids are coming on, and they've grown up from just small kids with classical training, and they can just play any of that Bach and Beethoven and Mozart and all those fancy things, but yet their heart's in the traditional church music and gospel music, and so they can play that. But you have to kind of have a little bit of music theory knowledge, maybe some of the Nashville number system training, but you can definitely make a career without having a formal training.
Yeah. Now, your history is mainly in Southern gospel.
Yeah.
So what do you think about today's contemporary Christian stuff?
At first there was such a division in the churches. The little country churches, I call them, like the little shouting Baptist churches like I grew up in, they just weren't going to have it. They didn't like the contemporary that was of the devil. They just didn't like it. And then the more modern churches went to the more modern music, and at some point there got to be a little bit of a blending there. And just this past weekend, I was in a little country church, and they sang some of the most beautiful praise and worship, what I would consider, what the mainstream people would consider contemporary, but it was well received in that small church. And I think people are just over the labels. They really are. I rarely refer to myself as a Southern gospel artist. I'm from the South. That's what I am. I'm Southern gospel. But I've got just as many friends up in Indiana and Ohio and Michigan and Pennsylvania that love it too. And as our industry is called, it is still referred to as Southern gospel music. But I just see those lines blurring to where, some of our leading groups are singing some of the contemporary music and doing really well with it. And they kind of put a little bit of more of a country twist on it maybe than the pop sound of the contemporary music. But to me, it's just all gospel music because it's the gospel set to music. And that's just the way I feel about it. If I like it, I call it gospel music.
I've been enjoying your Facebook Live post where you've been actually sitting back and recording some records, and I mean enjoying that. How many records do you think you own of Southern gospel?
And it is all Southern gospel with the exception of maybe 10 albums, and I'll tell you about those. But I've probably got 2,500 33 and third vinyl. I've probably got about that many compact discs and probably 5,000 cassettes. And it's just overwhelming. I need to get rid of most of that stuff. But the things that I do have that are not gospel, I have a few country albums because I've got a few friends in the country music industry. But my mother's brother was a pastor, and his wife would be my aunt by marriage. Her cousin is Harry Wayne Casey of Casey and the Sunshine Band.
Ah.
So this diehard gospel music lover has the complete Casey and the Sunshine Band collection, and it just freaks people out when they see it because they're like, I can't believe you like that kind of music. Well, I do love it because as a kid, his family name was Sparky, and he would come, and we lived next door to my aunt and uncle, and they just treated me like one of their kids. And he would come pulling up in his limousine, and he would take us to Dairy Queen, and if he was playing at the Omni, that kind of dates how long ago this was, he would take us to the Omni, and we'd stay backstage and get to check all that out and sit at his merch tables and that sort of thing. And so I do have those. I guess you wouldn't even call it rock. What would you even call what they did? It was kind of the disco era.
Yep.
Yeah. But I treasure those albums, and he's still very much a friend. I get to talk to him periodically. But my gospel collection is huge. And you were talking about the Facebook videos during the shelter in place. A lot of people were hungry to hear music because they're not able to get out and go to the venues. The artists aren't touring. So some of my friends started doing, the videos, and they would just be sitting and maybe playing a piano and singing, or singing with a pre-recorded music track. Well, I don't sing that well, never have, always played. So I did one video where I was just playing, and just taking requests, just watching the feed, and people would say, oh, I want to hear Amazing Grace. I'd play Amazing Grace, that sort of thing. Well, that got really boring to me really quick because, again, even though I've made a career of being a musician, I was always part of the band. I wasn't really ever the flash, So to sit down and play something besides just, that bass part of the band, here I was trying to play all these songs and make them to sound like where they really sounded like Amazing Grace or How Great Thou Art. It was tough. I did it, and it was fun, but I was like, I can't do that more than maybe once or twice. So I got to thinking, vinyl's making a comeback. I hadn't played albums in probably 15 or 20 years, even though I had this huge collection. I just didn't play them. I didn't have a decent machine. So I ordered a really nice turntable and just started playing old records, and the response was phenomenal. People were like, oh, I haven't heard that song in 30 years, or, oh, and I would play like church choirs, local church choirs, and people were like, you know what, I sang on that album. I used to go to that church, and just built this rapport with people. Or I would play, the Happy Goodman Family, and people were like, oh, I haven't seen that, I haven't heard them since Howard Vestal passed away back in 2003. Haven't heard that song. Or that's the very first album my mom and dad. Or we went to the Atlanta City Auditorium. People were just inundating me with their memories. And I just got to thinking, I was like, man, I'm on to something here. So we've done quite a few of those and had really good success with it. I hope to do some more.
Well, you probably don't remember this, but I first met you at a Perry's concert. It was a Christmas concert. A few years back, I built stages, and they rented one of my stages, and I met you there. But I've been following you ever since. I noticed you go to a lot of gospel concerts.
Well, we try
a lot of revivals and so forth.
We try to support. I've been very blessed over the years to make friendships with just about everybody in the industry. And people ask me all the time, they're like, how did you get to be friends with them? Well, I was, when I wasn't on the road, I would find myself either being a piano player or a minister of music at, a local church, and I would bring those groups in. Well, when you call a booking agent and bring a group in and you treat them right, and, they have a great service, they have a good crowd, they walk away with a nice honorarium, they sell a lot of product, they're going to remember you. So that's how I made a lot of these lasting friendships, not necessarily buying my friendship with them, but if you treat people right and truly are their friend and their fan, they remember you. And so that's kind of where a lot of that came from. Just got to know people by bringing them in to sing in my church or in other venues at, high school auditoriums or civic centers, that sort of thing. But that night with the Perrys, that was great. That was their Christmas tour. Yeah.
Yep. And you got a CD duplicate. Now I know that you've been doing that.
Yeah.
You actually did my daughter's CDs from a buddy of mine named Jason, a mutual friend of ours.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about that.
Well, I kind of backed into that business. I was working for Dr. Brenda Robinson and the New Desire Christian Ministries out of Rockmart, Cedartown, Aragon area. And she, not only was I their piano player, Brenda would go and speak at women's conferences and women's Bible studies. And so she had never really recorded and made available her speaking CDs. They'd go to Nashville and record music, but they never had anything of her speaking. And I encouraged that. I was like, Brenda, we need to be taping this. She's like, I don't know if I want to get into that. I was like, let's try it and just see what happens. So I went with her to a women's conference, took some equipment, and just made a master CD and made, I think, 20 copies. Well, we sold those 20 copies, just immediately when word got out that you could buy her. And so I invested in the equipment and just haven't looked back. The next thing I was doing small run orders for all of my buddies, because when they go to Nashville or wherever and record in these big studios, they usually got some sort of a package deal where they get 1,000 or 5,000 copies, included with the whole plan. But because so many of these groups have been on the road for so long, they still had, the old vinyl albums or cassettes, 8 tracks, that sort of thing, that are still good, viable recordings that people would want to buy at a discounted rate. So they would put them on CD, and instead of getting 1,000 or 5,000, I could offer them 10 or 15 or 25, and if it takes them a few weeks to sell, but they're not stocking that much product. And so I do an awful lot of that. I call it the vintage lines. Right. And then we have local singing groups who just don't have a need to have 1,000 or 5,000. They only need maybe 300. Well, the factories just don't do those quantities. So I was like, there's a little niche there. I've been able to fill that. And then, of course, here of late, a lot of the groups aren't selling that much because they aren't touring. So I was like, I can't not have income. So I was like, what else can I do So I've been doing where people will bring me cassettes or reel-to-reel tapes or VHS tapes, and I put them on CD or DVD for them. So I've been doing quite a bit of that in the last few months, and it's kind of kept the cash flow going. So that's been a blessing. But it's there again. It's something that a lot of people aren't doing. So I was very, very humbled that the Lord allowed that to
Amen.
to be my way of making a living.
So our viewers, what would be a good way if they wanted something like that to reach out to you? Would they just look up on Charlie Sexton under Facebook, or?
Well, I am on Facebook and Charlie Sexton, but you have to kind of look for me because there is a famous Charlie Sexton.
Yes, I'm aware of
who
that.
is a jazz guitarist. But if you look, you'll find me.
And then there's a comedian.
Yes.
And that's you as well. You like to play a little comedian.
Well, yeah, that, and there again, I
not know about that. What is it? Tell us
I don't know
that.
about all that.
Yeah,
I
I've
don't
seen
know
that.
about all that. Yeah. And I'll tell you how that started. Jerry Clower years ago said I backed into show business. Well, that's kind of me. Everything that I've ever done, I've kind of backed in. I didn't go saying this is my main goal, because like I said, as a kid, I wanted to be a piano player for Wendy Bagwell and the Sunlighters. When I realized that wasn't going to happen, I didn't have a clue of what that I would ever travel professionally, even though I did. But I backed into that. I was playing in my home church. The Sexton family came to our church, and they're like, "Boy, you play our style. Would you like to work for us?" I was like, "Well, I'll fill in for you." So I filled in for a while and turned into a full-time job. Did that for 6 or 8 years. Same thing. Brought in Liberty Quartet from Cumming, Georgia. Got to know them. They were just like my brothers, my best friends. Their piano player got married, left the group, gave them just a very short notice, and so they called and they're like, "Charlie, would you fill in till we find somebody?" Sure. 6 years later, I had traveled all over the United States. It's a full-time gig, as they say, but just never, really said. Same thing with Brenda Robinson. Her piano player left, and I had turned in my notice with Liberty, and was going to work in my church again, and had gone through some kind of a dark season. Had a broken engagement, and was just a lot of stuff, and I just was just wanting to go to the desert and hide for a while. And we met them, found out that they're a piano player, and she's like, "You're just not the type of person to sit around with the mully grubs." She said, "You need to travel with us till I find a piano player." Well, 2 years later, I'm like, "Are you not ever going to find a piano player?" And so I ended up working for a little while for them, but I just never just set my sights on this is what I want to do. I always kind of backed into it. Same thing with the comedy. I've never really considered myself a comedian. But because of Facebook, and because there's a little bit of anonymity behind a keyboard, I would just forward things that made me laugh. And then people would start sending me stuff. And I even had people sending me stuff that was maybe a little bit, not really off color, but just kind of pushed the envelope a little bit. And I'm like, I'm not going to say that, but I'll put it out there that somebody else said it,
right.
And or I may change it just a little bit. And the very first thing that somebody ever sent me, I remember, as Wendy Bagwell would say, this is a fact with my hand up, I remember crossing my arms and leaning back and going, I don't know about all that. And I thought, oh, Jeff Foxworthy's got, you might be a redneck if, different people that are in the comedy business, they've got their little slogans. I thought, I don't know about all that. I thought, that's it. If it takes me anywhere, it does. If it doesn't, it's fine. But now, and I don't mess with it near as much as I would really like to, but I do have people sending me stuff all the time. And if it just really tickles my funny bone, I'll post it on that. I don't know about all that.
I definitely enjoy it. Tell me this, too. You know, I've been knowing you for a while, quite a while. I met you a couple of years ago. Before that, I knew of you. So one of the things I have learned in life is you just don't become Charlie Sexton overnight. You had a great raising. I can tell you, your mom and dad. I don't know your mom and dad. I know Mama Joan is what
right.
But I tell you, I mean, they had you in church.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about that, and tell us about the time you maybe first picked up the piano.
Okay. Well, like I said, going back to Mom and Dad met at Pleasant Grove Baptist Church, where Wendy and the Sunlighters went, and I always tell people I went to church 9 months before I actually popped out on the earth. But so church is just what I do. I don't know a lot about sports. Back in the 90s, I got a little excited about the Braves when they went to the World Series. Never been a football fan, even though I looked like I could play football, and just never cared about it. Never really cared about basketball. We had a church softball league. I just wasn't good at it. But church is my ball game. I can tell you about church.
Right.
I can tell you when it's good. I can tell you when it's bad. I can tell you when something good's fixing to happen. I know how to, having grown up in church, I know the lingo. But all that aside, and not to get overly spiritual with you, but I know how to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
And when it gets right in a church service, we'll throw down and have church. And so that's where I come from. And as far as my piano playing, I did take music lessons for many years. A little funny story about that. I was playing for a little local singing group in my home church. We traveled maybe 20 miles radius of Lithia Springs. That was kind of our part of the field. And it was my cousin and his wife and a little girl that we went to church with. And I was still in high school. And I had been taking music lessons for several years, and I just was not a good piano player. I'm left-handed, so I was clunky. You know, I was put way too much emphasis on the boom chunk end of a piano, and my right hand, I just couldn't do all the fancy stuff. I would just sit and just labor over, doing all these classical runs and everything. And my piano teacher, it was just like misery every week. She's like, play these, you use the right finger and cross over and do this, do this, do your chords this way, don't do them this way, do them this way. And I just hated it. I endured that for probably 2 or 3 years. And then one day she said, next week I want your mom and dad to come in when you come in for your lesson. I said, okay. So mom and dad came into her living room, and she said, Mr. and Miss Sexton, I don't think he's ever going to be a piano player. I'm just wasting your time and your money. Don't bring him back. And Mom said, not going to make a piano player. Charlie, tell him what you did last night. Oh, okay. I said, Miss Judy, I was at Perfection Sound Studio till 2 o'clock this morning recording an album. So I was playing, because as we talked earlier, playing a little bit by ear, she was trying to squish me in her cookie cutter of classical music, when all I wanted to do was just tear into, Victory in Jesus and Amen. I'll Fly Away and Heaven's Jubilee and When We All Get to Heaven. And I could play that, and I was playing at church. And Miss Judy had no clue. She thought, this boy ain't never going to get it. And I had already been playing for a singing group, even to the point that I had been in the recording studio the night before she kicked me out of her music program. So that's kind of some of my early background, and I wouldn't take anything for it. But and you were talking about mom and dad, great Christian influence people. My dad was a big fisherman, big hunter, and as a child, you know, I loved him. He was my dad. He took care of me, and I loved him, and he loved me. But we're polar opposites. You
Right.
know? It just wasn't my thing to. I would go hunting and fishing and all that, but my heart wasn't in it. But when I started playing on the road full time, they both took a liking to what I was doing, and they supported me like no other. And then later on with Liberty, you know, traveling full time. By that time, Dad had retired, and he would tag along with us, and he was our product manager. So we got to spend the last, well, probably 6 years of my career with Liberty with my dad on the bus, and we just became best buddies, best friends. And Dad was a diabetic, and he had some health problems, and the camaraderie on that bus of those boys loving my daddy and taking care of him and helping me with him and loving the fact that he was there is something that I'll never forget. It's a memory that I cherish.
Now, I noticed a little duet you have with Miss Foster. Tell us a little bit about Miss Foster. Now, look, every time we talk about Miss Foster, you glow. So tell us a little bit about Lady Foster.
Her name is Linda Foster.
Yes.
I first met her many years ago at a Liberty concert at South Cobb High School, my alma mater, and we were there for Tony Peace. He was having a concert there, and I don't remember the groups, Dixie Melody Boys and Palmetto State and Liberty. And I looked on the back row, and there was this pretty blonde in this red dress, and all the guys on the bus, because I told you that I had gone through the broken engagement, and so I just was not interested. I did not want, it just wasn't the thing. And all the guys on the bus are like, well, there's Blondie with the red dress on. Well, look at there. Next week, we might be singing somewhere. We'd see her get out of her car and go inside. Oh, look, there's Blondie with the red dress on. Funny thing is, she don't even remember that red dress. But fast forward to many years later, I walked into a church after having come off the road and was just kind of searching for a new church home. And I walked in, and there she was up in the choir. She was up in the choir singing. And before the service was over, they called her down, and she sang a special, and the glory fell in that place. People were shouting, running, and throwing babies from the balcony. And I tell you what, it was just like heaven on earth. And I thought, now there's the one. So we became friends, and I finally found out her name was Linda, and I thought, well, Linda Foster, that's a beautiful name. After being around her for a few weeks, I noticed everybody was calling her Foster. I'm like, why do they call her Foster? And so she explained that, and you know what, now I can't even remember if it was high school or it might have been her first job. But anyway, there was another Linda that she worked with, and so they referred to the other Linda as Linda, and they called her Foster.
Yep.
And I just thought maybe that was her name. And so everybody called her Foster, and now that's just the only way I know her. And she got really bad sick about maybe 2007 or 8, something like that. I don't remember the date, but anyway, she got really, really bad sick. And where the lady part came from was we went to her childhood pastor's house, and they believed in anointing with oil and praying. And so we went to their house, and before we left, this was back before Facebook was really prevalent, but they had the chat rooms. And I was in a gospel music chat room with just thousands of people that loved the Lord and loved gospel music. And I said, please pray for Foster. She's having some health problems. We're not sure what it is, but we're going to have corporate prayer tonight at her pastor's church tonight. We started getting inundated with emails from people in the United Kingdom, and they would address her. They're like, please let the Lady Foster know that we're praying for her. And that just impressed me so much that I just started calling her the Lady. I said, the Lady Foster. And it just kind of has stuck. And now everywhere we go, people are, that's the way they refer to her. And if I ever refer to her as Linda, it blows people's mind. They're like, who?
Yeah.
And I'm like, Foster. And so that's kind of where that came from.
Little singing duet. You play the piano, she sings?
Yeah. I have never sung a whole lot, but we started getting calls, people wanting her to sing, and we did a couple albums on her, and we started accepting some dates, and I play the piano. Sometimes this one pastor referred to us as the Christian Captain in Tennille because she's always up singing and I'm over here playing and pushing buttons and but she would sing and I would play the keyboards. So showing my age there, a lot of people don't remember the Captain in Tennille, but anyway, we did that, and then about 2 years ago, we got a call to come sing at a homecoming in Hiram, Georgia, at Lighthouse Baptist Church. And an old family friend of ours, Dr. John Turner, called and he said, I want you and Foster to come sing at our homecoming service. And I said, we'd be honored to. So we made the date and booked it. And about 15 minutes later, he called back and he said, Charlie, I got to thinking about something. He said, I pastor, and he said, I sing here at the church quite a bit. And he said, I've got my male quartet, Steadfast Quartet. But he said, we don't sing that often. He said, we do about 6 or 8 dates a year. He said, I've always wanted to sing in a mixed group. He said, how about you and Foster come up on Saturday before the homecoming, and said, we'll put together a little something. He said, Selena Mangrum is my piano player, Selena King. And I said, yeah. Selena used to sing with Little Jan and Dr. Jerry Goff. So we knew Selena because of that connection. And so we got together and rehearsed, and we were just going to do maybe 1 or 2 songs. Well, before the night was over, we had 10 songs down. And we made the joke, well, we've got 10 songs, we need to cut a record. And so anyway, we went and sang the next morning there at the homecoming. We sang maybe 3 or 4 songs. Selena's husband did a Facebook Live. Before I got home, people were calling me saying, I want to book that group. I want to book that group. And I'm like, what group? They're like, that group we saw on Facebook today.
Right.
So we didn't even have a name. We just kind of jokingly called ourselves the Homecoming Trio. And so when the phone started ringing, I called them and I'm like, y'all aren't going to believe this, but people are wanting us to come sing. Do y'all even want to mess with this? Johnny said, I thought you'd never ask. Yes, let's do it. Selena was like, sure, why not? So we just, again, backed into Charlie Sexton and Homecoming. And that kind of came from, Johnny said, with your background in the industry, people know your name. We need to incorporate it. And to be honest, I was kind of kicking. I was like, no. And I said, but we can't use Homecoming either because that's Bill Gaither and the Homecoming Friends. I said, that'll never fly. And he's like, no. He said, if we do Charlie, he said, think of it, Wendy Bagwell and the Sunlighters, Brian Free and Assurance, Karen Peck and New River, Charlie Sexton and Homecoming.
Yes.
I was like, that's what y'all want to do, that's fine. So that kind of got backed into just like everything else. So we're just having a blast. Of course, we can't sing on Sunday morning, so we do a few dates a year, just Foster and myself, because obviously they can't leave their church on Sunday morning, but we do a lot of sing at revivals. We sing Saturday night singings, and then John had already made arrangements with his church. They don't do Sunday night service, and he was able to take a few dates with Steadfast. So now he's able to take Sunday nights with CS&H, as they call it. So
Excuse me. I'm dying to cough.
How long
I
are
was-
you holding that?
he had been holding that a while. I've been looking at him. I was like, he's fixing to bust.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
All right, go ahead.
Well, I've always enjoyed John Turner. He come to my church with Steadfast, and,
Yeah.
and one of the songs that I've always enjoyed was "He's All I Need."
Oh yeah.
We play it quite often in our church, and I'm
Yeah.
telling you, that is a beautiful song.
Yeah.
So I've enjoyed y'all's music as well. Tell me a little about the Redback Hymnal Series show you was doing.
Redback
Still doing
hymnals.
it.
Redback hymnals. I have to go back to Pleasant Grove. That was the hymn book that we used when I was just a kid. Every church I've ever been a part in had the old Redback hymnal. It was put out in 1951 by the Church of God, but I have it on good authority from some friends in the Church of God. They said if it weren't for the little country Baptist churches, they wouldn't have sold near as many of those books as they have over the years. 10 years ago, they hit the 60 million mark of having printed 60 million books. I have no idea what it is now. But since then, there's just been a love and resurgence for that good old book that has so many of the hymns. And somebody says, well, what book is it? I'll say, look on page 57. If it's Amazing Grace, that's
Grace.
it. And somebody said, well, mine's not red, it's burgundy. Well, they were all burgundy. But then people got fancy. These fancy churches started putting in green carpet, so they started making the green hymn books, but it's the same book. And then the really ultra fancy churches, you may not even know this, they even make those in blue. I don't think that you can even get them anymore, but they made them in blue for many years. So the Redback, and then they come out with the green and the blue. But it's actually maroon. It's kind of a burgundy color. But everybody calls it the Redback. And the way that all kind of started, at least here in Atlanta, my friend Lamar Newton, his dad passed away. They had his funeral at a little church in Cobb County called Corner Baptist Church.
Yep.
He had invited a lot of his singing friends to come make up a mass choir to sing at his dad's service. And long story short, the place packed out really early, and the piano player just started playing. Well, the next thing you know, a couple of the people just kind of started humming along, and then before long, people were singing along. And before long, they were just singing at full tilt. And it was still an hour before time for the service to start. Well, the undertaker comes in and he's looking around like, what did I miss? What did I miss? The family's back. They're not even ready to come in. And, here they are having church and throwing down. People were shouting and praising the Lord and singing and having a big old time. And it hadn't even started. So he come in and he spoke to the piano player and told him, he's like, now stop at the end of the song. I'll bring the family in and y'all just pick right back up. So sure enough, that happened. And after the service, because we sung about an hour beforehand, and then the service lasted about 2 hours, there were two speakers, and they only talked maybe 5 minutes. It was all choir singing, and just that good old stuff. Some of the songs I named earlier, How Beautiful Heaven Must Be When We All Get to Heaven, Heaven's Jubilee. An old song called Not Made with Hands. I'll never forget them singing that day. It was absolutely beautiful. They sung it a cappella, and you could just literally hear that building sing. After it was over, somebody came up to me and said, what just happened here, that would make a great concert if somebody had guts enough to try to put it together. Well, again, long story short, Lamar and his buddy Jeff Nunley put us singing together like that. And I had already made a few calls, and I called them, invited them to mine. They told me about theirs. And so this was in April. Then by October, we had promoted 2 Red Book singings, one at Atlanta Street Baptist in Roswell and one at Mount Harmony Baptist in Mableton. And had huge crowds, had maybe 100 people in the choir. And at Mount Harmony, we had 500 people in the audience. So, that was big crowds, for something that was just class singing out of the hymn book. Somebody would call a number and we'd start playing and just sing it. Next thing you know, they're going to come in Georgia, and a really nice big church up there, and they've been doing one the first of the year, an annual one that's just been amazing. Just tremendous crowds. And that's pretty much the only one they do now. They were doing maybe 2 and 3 a year, but they kind of honed in on just the one at I call it the Granddaddy.
Right.
The Granddaddy Redback singing, and it's at Coal Mountain. But along the way, I had people at a local Atlanta Christian television station ask me about bringing it to the TV station. And we did that 2 or 3 times. And then up in Greenville, South Carolina at Dove Christian Broadcasting, just a legendary Christian. I mean, it's right up there with the back in the day when Pat Robertson's CBN and 700
Right,
Club
right.
was big, and the PTL network. Of course, we all know about the Bakers and all that. But this was a big driving force. This was a huge network out of Greenville, South Carolina. Very legendary. They invited us up, and we took several groups and put together a mass choir up there. And the first show we did live on television that night. It started. We got there sometime that afternoon. We rehearsed. They served lunch. We got ready and did the show live, literally live from 8 to 10. And they said it was one of the biggest shows they'd ever had in the whole history of the thing. The phones were just constantly ringing off the hook. The most emails they'd ever gotten about a show. And there again, just backed into doing TV. And the next thing you know, they're calling and say, "Hey, when can you come back? This was huge." So it's been something to see a resurgence of the love for that book. And along the way, my buddy Gerald Wolfe with Greater Vision, one of our leading male trios, Gerald grew up on this music, loved it, and he called and he said, "I don't want to horn in on what y'all are doing, but I think I'm going to start doing these." I was like, "Do it, buddy." He's like, "Well, tell me a little bit about how you do it, and what have you done?" And so I sent him some of the tapes, and he had seen some things on social media. And then he sends me an invitation. He said, "I'm going to do this at my home church, and I'm bringing in a video crew and a recording studio, a mobile studio." They recorded in surround sound. It's amazing to listen to that recording that they made that night in Marshtown, Tennessee, to listen with headphones on. I've never heard anything to compare. And Gerald's done those concerts all over the United States, and has really just brought back a love for that book. And it just makes my heart smile to know that I was just a little part of it, and that Lamar and Jeff, of course, I credit them for really starting it. A lot of people attach my name to it, but I was just kind of in the backgrounds, and then kind of, as I say, I backed into it. But I'm honored. I'm very honored. And we even have a Redback museum now in Cleveland, Tennessee, that you can actually
wow.
go to and visit, that shows the background of the people that helped put the book together. And I didn't know this at first. I mentioned Jerry Goff earlier, being married to little Jan Buckner. When they married, and Jerry mostly moved to Georgia. He maintained a condo in Nashville, but mostly he lived in Hiram, at little Jan's farm there. And we got to be just really big buddies. We'd go out to eat a lot and have lunch, and he would mentor me on so many things. And one day I had no idea he was asking about. He's like, "Well, how's the Red Book thing going?" I said, "Oh, it's great." He said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm wanting to go to the one in Atlanta that Gerald's doing, to the taping." I said, "Yeah, you need to go." He said, "I'll tell you something I bet you didn't know." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "My dad helped put that book together." He said he worked for Tennessee Music and Publishing back
Wow.
or Tennessee Music and Printing. He said back in the day he was a Church of God preacher, and he was on the committee that put that book together. So that just, again, made my heart smile that my buddy Jerry Goff had a little history with it, and he loved that book. He could tell you so many facts about it that I could never begin to. And he left us July of last year, so
Right.
passed away
Yeah, I heard about that.
Went to the big homecoming in the sky.
Amen.
Yeah, I miss him.
So tell
He
us
was my
about
buddy.
2008. You was nominated for an Emmy.
Oh,
Tell us a little bit about that.
well, at some point, I had worked part-time. Well, I had worked full-time in the X-ray sales and service business, and then when I got into full-time music, I had left that. So when I got out of full-time music, I was building my CD and duplicating business, and just through the grace of the Lord, I was able to make a living. But I knew I needed some more education, so I did something I never dreamed I'd do. I went to college and signed up for the entertainment television production track at Chattahoochee Technical College, and walked in those doors just green as a gourd, didn't know anything about higher education, and I was scared to death. And of course, I was late 40s going into that, and here were all these young kids fresh out of high school, and here was this old man over here in the corner, and they were looking at me like, what is he doing here? But I got in there with them, and I learned everything that I could learn about running cameras and doing After Effects graphics and editing and the color chrome and all that. And something that they did that worked out really good for the students to have real world hands-on type thing is the KSU had a basketball team had a highlight show, and we produced it in our little studio. It was very reminiscent. When I walked in here today, I thought, oh, this was bringing back so many memories, because this is about like the studio we had there at the college. And so one day, two of the kids, we had been paired up in teams, and we were doing a highlights reel on a young kid named Keontae Keith. And he was a good-looking, tall basketball player, and I mean, he just, was the quintessential basketball player, and he knew he was good. And so they had gone and filmed him. But what I didn't know, because I'd been on the road that weekend, and I come back in on a Monday, and one of the guys in the crew, he said, we went and filmed Keontae at his church. Did you know he was a drummer at his church? I said, oh, no, I had no idea. Well, I started watching that footage, and they're like, we're having an issue with the audio. And I said, let me see what I can do. So I spent maybe 5 minutes tweaking a little bit of audio, because that was one of the things that frustrated me about college is I went to learn lighting and TV and editing and all like this, and the graphics and Photoshop and building the lower thirds and all that. That's what I wanted to do. But on that TV show, they're like, Charlie's our best audio guy. Well, I know audio. That's all I've ever done, with singing groups. So I knew audio inside and out. Well, they threw me on the audio board, and so he knew I knew audio. So he's like, go in the audio suite and see if you can sweeten that up a little bit. So I went in there and I made just a few adjustments. I didn't think a thing about it. Never one time thought about my name being associated with this project. But they turned it in. We got a really good grade. Still didn't think a thing about it. Well, graduation day came and gone, and I went on about life. And one day my phone rang, and they're like, is your name Charlie? Yes, it is. Did you go to Chattahoochee Tech? Yes, I did. Did you take so-and-so class? Yes, I did. Well, we need your mailing address. We need to send you your Emmy nomination. And I said,
Wow.
My what? And long story short, the instructor had turned that clip in that we had done for that project, for that little in-house TV show, and submitted it to the, I guess the NARAS, I think they call it, but the Emmy people, and I was just blown away. I thought it was a joke. I still can't believe it. I mean, sure enough, I got nominated for an Emmy. And,
Wow.
And one of their questions was, have you got a tuxedo? And I said, yeah. They're like, well, put it on and be downtown Atlanta at such and such a day and such a time because y'all got a good chance of winning this. Well, we didn't. We were up against Channel 2 and Channel 5 and Channel 11 and all these big things. We knew we weren't going to win, but we got to go eat real good that night.
Absolutely.
We got to dress up and have our picture made in front of the big Emmy Globe. But, yeah, never would have dreamed that'd be nominated for an Emmy.
Wow.
It's just the hand of God. It's all you can say.
So we know you professionally. Who are you at heart?
I've always been a big guy. I've always struggled with my weight. Very much an introvert. I'll never forget the first time I just really come out of my shell on stage and walked off the stage, and I was like, whoa, where did that come from? That's just so not me. And I remember praying, Lord, if I was entertaining or if I was just being fake, take that away from me. I don't want that. That's not me. But I found out that is me. It's just a different side of me. But if you were to see me, if you could open this up, I just hit my microphone, but if you could open me up and see my heart, I just love people. I want to help people. I want to encourage people.
Yes.
I'm a Christian. I make no bones about that. That's how I've made my living in Christian music. And the truth of the matter is, I believe when we die, there's two places we go, heaven or hell.
Right.
People may not believe it, but I believe it, and I want to point people to heaven. And I don't want to beat them over the head with the Bible. I don't want to point my finger in their face. I don't want to do anything that would turn anybody against being open. I just want to live my life in such a way that people would say, I want what he's got. I want that joy. Do I have bad days? Sure. And you know about some of those bad days.
Yeah.
But God's faithful.
Yep.
He gets us through those. We get through those days one prayer at a time. And my heart is, if it takes me being silly and folding my arms and saying, I don't know about all that, if that gets somebody's attention and it lightens their load and it makes them forget about what's bugging them, what's got them stressed out, if they can leave that behind for just a few minutes while I'm playing the piano, whether it be a spiritual shouting, running the aisle, or whether it just be something fun and light, if it makes somebody feel better, I feel like I've done my job.
Yes.
That's Charlie Sexton.
Well, you're definitely inspiring, and I'm honored to be your friend, and thank you so much for being on our show today, and it's been an honor.
God has always had.
Thanks for watching this episode of Trails to Fame. Please send your thoughts and comments to Joey at jmpro.com. We also invite you to like us on facebook.com/J-P-Productions. See you next time on Trails to Fame.
Who gave the great command, for they knew they were guided by that precious unseen hand.